Kim Philby, a KGB spy leading British intelligence. Kim was a young student at Cambridge University in the 1930s when he secretly became a communist. Around that time, the Soviet spy agency, then called the NKVD, recruited him. After World War II began, Philby joined British intelligence MI6. Ironically, his job was to track Soviet spies, but he was already working for them. He climbed high in MI6, gaining full access to Britain's top secrets. For years, he passed that information straight to Moscow. He exposed dozens of Western operations and gave up the names of undercover agents. Many of those agents were caught and were executed because of his leaks. But Philby wasn't alone. He was part of a secret network known as the Cambridge Spy Ring, which had 5 British men who spied for the Soviet Union. 2 of them, Guy Burgess and Donald Maclean, were his close friends. When they suddenly escaped to Moscow in 1951, Philby came under suspicion too. MI6 questioned him several times, but he denied everything. And because he was so respected, calm, polite, and professional, the British government believed him. But by the early 1960s, new evidence emerged linking Philby directly to the Soviet leaks. MI6 decided to confront him again. Realizing he was about to be exposed, Philby fled Beirut in 1963, boarded a Soviet ship, and defected to Moscow. He lived there until his death in 1988, protected by the same country he had secretly served for over 30 years. Robert Hanssen, FBI hunting FBI. Hanssen joined the FBI in 1976. His job was to protect America's secrets from KGB. But in 1979, Hanssen made contact with the Soviets. He used code names, hidden messages, and dead drops under bridges, trading classified files for cash. His leaks exposed 3 Soviet agents who were secretly working for the US, and all 3 were executed. Yet, no one suspected him. The FBI blamed CIA, and the CIA blamed technical failures. And Hanssen stayed invisible. Modest lifestyle, quiet personality, nothing flashy. By the late 1990s, the CIA and FBI realized the leaks were coming from inside the bureau. In a desperate, high-risk maneuver, the FBI secretly paid a massive sum of $7 million to a high-post KGB agent. The bounty was for a single critical asset, a file on an anonymous mole operating within the American system. By doing careful analysis of fingerprint and voice from the phone calls, the FBI was able to cross-reference the anonymous information with their entire staff. The evidence pointed squarely at FBI agent Robert Hanssen. And then on one cold evening in February 2001, Hanssen drove to a park in Virginia, carrying one last package of stolen files. He placed it under a bridge, unaware he was surrounded, and moments later, they arrested him. After 22 years of betrayal, the mole within the FBI was finally caught. Oleg Gordievsky, the KGB officer who spied for Britain. Oleg Gordievsky joined the KGB in the 1960s, trained as a loyal officer of the Soviet Union. But as he served abroad, he saw a different picture of the world. Free societies, open news, people unafraid of their own government. Quietly, he began questioning everything he once believed. And in 1974, while stationed in Copenhagen, he secretly offered to spy for the British intelligence agency, MI6. For years, Gordievsky climbed the KGB ranks while secretly sending inside reports about KGB operations, undercover officers, and Soviet political strategies to MI6. He became one of the West's most valuable spies during the Cold War. His biggest achievement came when he was posted to London and later promoted to run the KGB station there. That meant MI6 had direct access to Soviet plans in the United Kingdom. But in Moscow, someone became suspicious. KGB noticed that Britain seemed to know too much. And in 1985, when several Soviet missions suddenly collapsed, the KGB reviewed cases of leaks, and they became suspicious of Gordievsky, and then he was suddenly recalled to Moscow. He knew this wasn't a promotion, it was a trap, but anyways, he went there and then KGB interrogated him repeatedly. They even drugged him with a truth serum, but they lacked clear proof of betrayal. In the meantime, MI6 quickly activated Operation Pimlico, the escape plan operation. Western agents smuggled Gordievsky through Moscow and across the Soviet border, hidden inside a car trunk, barely avoiding checkpoints. Soviet Union charged him with treason and sentenced him to death, a sentence that could only be carried out if he ever returned to Russia. Jonathan Pollard, the man who spied for Israel. Jonathan was a civilian intelligence analyst working for the U.S. Navy in the 1980s. His job gave him access to America's top secret military and surveillance data, things like satellite images, nuclear capabilities, and reports on enemy weapons. But Pollard wasn't spying for an enemy nation. Instead, he was spying for Israel, one of America's closest allies. Pollard believed the U.S. wasn't sharing enough intelligence with Israel, especially about threats from Arab countries, so he decided to help by stealing it himself. At first, he passed a few classified documents to his Israelis handlers, but soon it turned into thousands. He'd load briefcases full of files, copy them overnight, and hand them over for cash, jewelry, and expensive trips. Pollard stole so many documents that his small office literally ran out of space. Eventually, security officers noticed something odd. He was accessing files that had nothing to do with his assigned projects. That triggered an internal investigation. When they confronted him, Pollard panicked. He grabbed his briefcase, ran to his car, and drove straight to the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., hoping they'd protect him. But when he arrived, the Israeli guards refused him entry. He was left standing on the sidewalk as FBI agents arrested him right outside. The incident exploded into a major diplomatic crisis between Israel and the United States. Pollard was sentenced to life in prison in 1987 for espionage. Aldrich Ames, the mole who crippled the CIA. In the early 1980s, Aldrich Ames worked at the CIA's Counterintelligence Center. His job was to identify Soviet spies working for the U.S. He had access to names, operations, and safe houses, the most protected information. But he had a problem. Debt. He owed money, he was going through a divorce, and he felt the CIA undervalued him. In 1985, he decided to solve that problem in the most dangerous way possible. Ames walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. and offered to sell secrets. No pressure, no blackmail, and he volunteered. At first, the KGB didn't even trust him, but when he handed them a list of almost every active CIA asset inside the USSR, they realized he was real. And within few months, the CIA noticed something terrifying. Their top informants in the Soviet Union were being arrested or disappearing one by one. At first, they suspected code breaches or surveillance errors. No one believed a CIA officer at headquarters would betray them, especially not one whose job was catching traitors. Meanwhile, Ames received over $4 million in payments. He upgraded his lifestyle, luxury house, expensive car, and explained it as his wife's family money. But in 1992, a new CIA investigation team focused purely on evidence. They found Ames had access to every leaked operation, and his sudden wealth didn't match his salary. The FBI put him under surveillance, monitored his banking, and collected discarded papers from his home. On February 21, 1994, Ames was arrested while driving to work and sentenced to life in prison without parole. His spying caused the death or capture of at least 10 American sources in the USSR. Rudolf Abel, the spy swap. Rudolf Abel was a KGB spy living quietly in the United States after World War II. He used the identity of a calm, ordinary artist in Brooklyn, but his real job was to manage Soviet sleeper agents and collect information about American military and nuclear projects, and he worked very carefully. He didn't take risks and stayed away from anyone the FBI was already watching. The person who exposed him was not the FBI, but his assistant, Reino Heihanen. Heihanen was ordered to go back to the Soviet Union, but he was afraid he would get punished for his mistakes. Instead of returning, he went to U.S. officials and told them everything about Abel's spying work. He gave details about secret messages, codes, and even places where Abel hid information. With this information, the FBI was finally able to locate Abel. They arrested him in 1957 inside a hotel room in Manhattan. After the arrest, the U.S. decided not to execute Abel because they believed he might be useful in a future exchange. 5 years later, in 1962, the U.S. traded Rudolf Abel for American pilot Francis Gary Powers, who was captured after his U-2 spy plane was shot down over the Soviet Union. The exchange happened on the Glienicke Bridge in Berlin. After the swap, Abel returned to the Soviet Union, was welcomed as a loyal officer, and lived there until his death in 1971.